to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon and I am a relationship expert, international speaker and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, TV or social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories and listen to what real people think, do or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today we have Emma Jenkins, and we are going to talk about conflict. Hi, Emma.
Hello, hi. Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, of course. So I am a mediator. My specialism is in workplace mediation. I set up my business at the beginning of 2016, Mosaic Mediation. And so basically my role is to go into organisations and help them resolve disputes going on between colleagues or within the directorship or management, to help facilitate conversations that might be quite tricky. But I've also started doing small business mediation, so helping small organisations resolve conflicts between themselves and clients or suppliers. And I also do training and conflict coaching one-to-one.
Fair enough. So obviously the thing with conflict is that the minute you put a couple of humans together, they're going to have an interaction, whether they like each other or not, and there's bound to be, at some point or another, a disagreement, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So how would you define conflict, for starters?
Okay, so I think a lot of people, when they think about conflict, think about a big blow up, like a really visible sign of anger, and normally it's shouting or swearing, those kinds of things. To people go, that's conflict.
Well, you'd class as, so to speak, an argument.
Yes, exactly. Whereas what I would perceive as conflict is a lot more subtle. So I would perceive conflict to be people proactively not speaking with each other, or trying to avoid certain issues. Anything really that disrupts that really nice flow of communication, I would consider to be conflict.
So that kind of like works as well if you think of a couple, because there's certain issues that won't be spoken about that really ought to, because it's like walking around the elephant in the room, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think just from speaking to people over the years, and I'm very grateful to have friends who I can call friends who are of various generations, and family members who've had different lengths of relationships. And the one thing that seems to be unanimous amongst all of them is to make sure you deal with issues when they're small. And I think that's such a massive thing, because so many people do live with those unspoken bits of tension. And there are some things obviously that happen within a relationship which are quite small, and you almost have to kind of mentally decide, is this an issue
important or not?
Is this an issue, or am I making it to be something bigger than it is? But if it is something that you keep coming back to, if it's something that you mention every time there is an argument, or the first thought that you have when you're angry with your partner, then that means it's an issue.
And I think that the issue is, if you take a work environment, we, to a degree, choose our relationships at home, so to speak. Although some people would argue that they're stuck in a marriage or in a relationship and feel they can't leave, but let's leave that one out for a minute.
Yeah.
When you're at work, you do feel like you can't choose who you work with.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think sometimes it's important to also remember that even if you're desperate for a job, if an organisation doesn't really quite tick the boxes for you, not to take it for starters, because you're unlikely to get on with people who work within it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so often we do interviews based on skill, and I think that's important. That is absolutely important. But I think also the way that you communicate with someone is just as vital as the person being able to do the job.
Yeah.
Because if you're able to work well in a team, then you can do so much more than just individuals working well in their own space but not working well together.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, because obviously, as you know, with what I do, communication is extremely important.
Yes,
And what I find to be the cause of a lot of the problems is that people, for starters, don't understand themselves, then expect everybody to do what they want them to do without communicating that particularly well either, most of the time. And I think it is quite similar in a work relationship. I mean, I often say that in, for instance, networking, and for those people who don't know what it is, it's more of a professional kind of meeting where you interact within a lot of people, or in a sphere with loads of people that do different things, and it's about referring each other if you feel like the person's good at what they do, blah, blah, blah. But it's very similar to dating, because you are going to, make judgments and ideas, perceptions of a person based on what you see and what you want to hear, just as much as you do, in a dating environment.
Absolutely. And I think often what happens in mediations is that people talk about the situation that they're going through currently, but in every single mediation that I've done, they also refer back to
something else,
interactions they've had with other people, and that maybe this person reminds them of or does the opposite to, and they would like them to have done it the way that so and so did it in the past. I think our history and our experiences in relationships really influence how we perceive other people, and especially at that beginning moment of either a romantic relationship or a work relationship. Although you tend to kind of be able to suss out whether you're going to get on with someone or not a little bit, but there are so many moments. There are so many relationships that you'll hear about where they started off not really liking each other, but there was space to allow that relationship to develop and not kind of put like a full stop on it.
And in the same breath, there are relationships that started off really, really well, where they can't stand each other within 2 minutes, sort of thing.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
So do you think that conflict can always be resolved? Because one of the things that I've seen is that, unfortunately, both parties have to be open to that.
Yes, I think that's probably essential, that at some point in trying to resolve it, both parties are on board. Often it won't be that both parties are open to it at the same time right at the beginning. It may be that one person is the one who's cheerleading for some kind of resolution, and then it takes a while for the other person to kind of work it through mentally and go, actually, I'm at a point now where I want to move forward. But if that doesn't happen, if there is only one of the two or three or however many people are involved in a workplace relationship, or obviously the two, also however in the romantic relationship, if not everyone is on board, then that's going to create issues, because resolving conflict is very much a two-way thing.
So tell us a bit more about mediation in that way. How do you facilitate that?
Okay, so I don't do family mediation. I mainly do employee resolutions.
But I'm pretty sure that the principles are pretty much similar.
Pretty much the same, exactly. Every mediator is completely neutral. So although I've seen a number of these cases now where I can probably start to figure out what's gone on and what needs to happen to move things forward. I have to park those feelings aside and help them really think through what's happened, not so that they come to the resolution that I want them to come to, but so that they come to a resolution that sits well with them.
Yeah, and is workable for the future.
Yes, exactly. Because it's not going to work if I think that there's a solution that I'm not them, I'm not in their situation, I don't have their history, and they do. So they know. I think a lot of us actually are a lot better at resolving things than we think we are. We often kind of lose hope before we need to, but I help them kind of maintain that hope And I do a lot of asking questions. Although I am neutral, I do ask challenging questions sometimes to really get them to think through and reality check, is what I thought happened actually what happened?
Or is it my perception of it?
Yeah, exactly. And actually what I do find is that for at least the first couple of hours of a mediation session is spent unpicking assumptions that have been made, and more often than not very incorrectly. They weren't based on reality. They were based on the reality as they saw it, but not based, so often the other person is really surprised by what that first person thought. Really surprised. Yeah.
And I think it's the same in, romantic relationships, so to speak. So many times in a relationship of any kind, there is a conflict, but it's only going on in the head of one person, actually. And
yes.
the minute they try to work it through by themselves as opposed to talk about it, because they're scared of that tricky conversation, then that's actually the beginning of the end a lot of the time. And the other person, who is, most of the time ends up being left, actually comes as a shock because we didn't have a clue there was a problem to start off with.
No, absolutely. I think so often it feels like when conflict happens, the other person feels like they've come in halfway through a conversation.
So how would you advise people to handle conversations that are tricky?
I think it's really important to, if it's something that's going to be sensitive to either yourself or the other person, I think it's really important to have some time to think. So often what people do when they're not quite sure, because often what people do when they are having to deal with something tricky is they either avoid until it becomes like a really big issue, or they go, okay, we just need to have this conversation, and they leap into it without really giving it much forethought. But if I actually have a downloadable workbook that I give to people so that they can fill out. I call it 5 steps to clarity in essential conversations, because I think you need to think about, how do you feel about what you're talking about? What's going on when you're going to have that conversation? If you're going to try and talk to something about a really big issue when they've just come through the door from work after a busy day, you're probably not going to get a good response whether they want to resolve something or not, because it's the context and the timing is just not right. But also, I think more than anything else, it's having a real clarity about what you want to achieve from having the conversation. Yeah, and also, what if I don't have this conversation? I think so often we go, I can't have this conversation just in case they blow up at me, or we have a big fight, or any of those kinds of things. They think differently about me. But often we don't think, what if I don't have this conversation? And I think if people thought more in that way, then they may be more open to really tackling those big issues in those relationships. Because I think so often in relationships, we need to be present, but we also need to have the long term in mind. If I want to have a healthy relationship with my partner in 10, 15, 20 years' time, if I don't have this conversation now, what will our relationship look like?
Then, completely. And I think going back to the context, one of the things that my mum always taught me as a child was that if I wanted something, I should ask my dad once he's eaten. He was very right, because once he's eaten, 90% of the time the answer would be yes. If he had not eaten, 95% of the time it was a no.
Yeah. And do you know what, it's funny, when I was doing my mediation training, one of the key points that was brought up, aside from learning how to be a mediator and all of that, but along with facilitating the actual session, one of the key points was to remember to have food and drink. Because people don't do well when they're hungry. They don't make good decisions. They don't feel empathetic towards other people. Food really, it's funny, but it does have a real impact.
Yeah, and I think, in the same way as you say, when someone walks straight through the door, you don't know whether they've had a nice journey home or they or to work, wherever, or, you know, whether it's been stressful. So you can't, and I think sometimes people forget that these things need to be planned a little bit, because it's not just about you getting your point across. You've got to allow for the other person to tell you where maybe in their eyes you've gone wrong, instead of thinking that, you know, you've done everything right, and in your eyes you probably have, but in theirs you probably haven't.
Yes, and I think what we don't realise is that people sometimes need something to happen before they're able to hear you. And sometimes that is that they need to have eaten, or sometimes it is that they need to have said something first. They need to get something off of their chest before they're able to hear you.
I was just about to say that, because this is actually where arguments start, is that the other person wants to make their point across. So if you start by getting them to realise that you understand their point of view, they're less likely to just try and butt in. They are going to be more open to listening to your side, because they feel understood. Otherwise, they're switching off until they've said their bit. So you never get anything resolved.
No, exactly. And I think when you go into a conversation that is going to be quite difficult, if you go into it with the frame of mind of, I want to offload, then you may be able to do that and go tick box, I offloaded. But is that actually the aim that you really wanted in truly? Did you want to just offload, or did you want to reconnect emotionally with your partner? And if you want to reconnect with your partner, or, you know, even in a workplace scenario, if you want to reconnect and re-establish that strong relationship, going into a difficult conversation under that view of, I'm going to try and learn something about them in this, not just let them learn something about me, but I want to learn something about them in this.
Yeah, completely. And I think that the other thing that I come across a lot, and that I have to get through to people, is that basically a relationship or a conflict or anything like that is about one choice. And it's the choice between being right or being happy. Because you can't really be both half the time. You're either right or you're happy. And they just don't go hand in hand. And I think it's the same for anything, really. You know, are we that adamant that that's what we want, that we are prepared to walk away from everything else, sort of thing?
Exactly. So I think so often in life, when you're making decisions about how you're going to handle something, it's helpful to think, what is this worth? Is it worth it to me to ignore this issue, which I'd think most of the time it's not worth it. It's not worth having that momentary peace for having many years of resentment or friction. It, you know, equally, it's not worth your relationship just to kind of blow up at your partner.
Yeah, completely. And so, to a degree, in the home environment, we're more likely to do that than we would be in a work environment. So there's probably more resentment going on. Well, no, there's probably just as much, but because it's more difficult in a work environment to really say certain things. I mean, even to stay in certain jobs, there's still now things I'd like to say to certain people. So is it that I've had a grudge? I don't think it is. It's just that I would have liked them to understand me at the time better, or the other way around, you know, them to know about a decision that was made and why it was like that and why it was decided in that way.
Yeah, I think in pretty much any interaction we have in life, what we want out of it is to feel a little bit understood and accepted.
Completely. And that leads us really to the C word, which is compromise.
Yes.
Which so many people hate, actually. Some people just, you know, don't like it.
Yes, I think for a lot of people, they hear the word compromise and they feel like then that means they're missing out on something, or they're not getting as much as what they deserve.
And they've let the other person win.
Yeah. And I think the way that a lot of mediators will look at when you're trying to reach resolution is trying to find a win-win, so that it doesn't feel like a compromise in the negative sense, but it feels like, okay, we talk about interests and needs rather than wants and things. So if my interest, for as an example, is to feel respected at work, and that's like the biggest thing that I really, really want. But I'm also at the same time asking for a pay rise, and the other person really doesn't want to give me a pay rise. They don't have the finances to do that, but they can give me the respect that I'm really after. Mm-hmm. If they're able to do that, am I okay to compromise on the salary? And if that is okay, then it does come out as a win-win, even though you have technically, you know, compromised. Yeah. Actually, you are getting what you really truly wanted. And more often than not, what I have found is that if people are trying to get pay rises or if they're trying to get like a better, in their eyes, a better job title or anything like that, more often than not, it's not actually about that. It's that feeling of being respected, of being valued, of people acknowledging what they've done. And once they have had that, they feel okay to compromise on those things that they came in kind of demanding in the first place.
And I think this is the thing. Sometimes we don't actually, we think we know what it is we want, but we don't. Yeah. Because as you just said, it's not really about the pay rise or whatever. Sometimes it is, but you know, a lot of the time in a conflict, it isn't what we think it's about, actually.
No. More often than not, it's the feelings aspect of it that are missing, and we want them to kind of be acknowledged.
And I think the other thing that people forget is that a conflict, whether it's at work or at home for that matter, is going to affect your performance and productivity at work.
Yes.
Because in a past life, when I used to have to manage people, Jesus Christ, if you had an argument at home the day before, you know, you had to basically sort it out before they did anything else. Yeah. Otherwise, they weren't going to do anything else, you know?
I don't think people give enough credit to how much brain space conflict takes up. And, you know, you only have so much capacity to do certain things and think about certain things. And conflict, you know, if you're arguing with a spouse or a sibling or a child or a colleague, that's going to be just in the back of your head. And especially, you know, someone who you're living with or you're working with, you're around them a lot. So that it's like a constant trigger to remind you about what's going on.
And I think that the thing as well, as you said earlier, you know, it's not always about something obvious. Sometimes it's trickled in before the big obvious things happened.
Yes.
And it's not a healthy environment to be in.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't sit well with people. And again, in every mediation that I've done, there is always some side effect to the conflict that they bring up. So a key one is not sleeping very well. Mm-hmm. Often their mental health or emotional well-being has really suffered. Many people who are having conflicts at work will talk about the impact it's having on their relationship at home. Mm-hmm. And it is just a real spiral of side effects. As soon as conflict happens, you know, it has such an outreach into every area of life.
And I think this is the thing, because I've had to deal with that, you know, not just when I was managing people, but also in what I'm doing now, where, and it is going back to what we said earlier, is the fear of saying something, and is the fear of, well, basically getting a worse outcome, because that's how we're wired, is that, you know, survival versus pleasure sort of thing. Where we only anticipate the worst case scenario.
Yes.
And sometimes, sorry, carry on.
Oh, no, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're about to say is sometimes it does end up being the worst scenario.
That's what I was just about to say. To say, and sometimes actually the best outcome is to walk away.
Yes, because you see the reality of what your relationship is, or how, you know, how the other person behaves. But also sometimes I think we don't give people enough credit. That, you know, I don't tend to talk about my relationship with, you know, in a work context, but the number of times, having been married for a number of years now, where I have, you know, with all my years of experience of learning about human behavior and conflict, the number of times that I have underestimated the compassion of my partner is, I can't count the number of times I have expected him to do something, expecting a negative outcome, and then actually he's really come through.
And I think this is the thing, we when he affects us, we do lose a little bit of common sense.
The
other thing I found with regards to conflict, because it's often, part of me wants this, part of me wants that, and, on paper this, but actually that. And it's just about making a decision and finding the balance between what your head is saying and between what your heart wants. I'm thinking of someone in particular with this particular example who, actually wants to leave her job. But the truth is, she's throwing every single excuse as to why not. From money to, like a lot of people would, to be fair. But actually, she has got far more choices than she believes. But because of that fear of survival, blah, 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 she's closing all the doors around her as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, I think we get stuck in a rut sometimes because it feels a lot safer to be in the box than to think outside the box of what could be.
I mean, there's a meme that is, I've seen it 1,000 times on Facebook, where you see this cat in a cat box looking, through the grill type thing and not realising that the top of the box has actually been lifted. So facing up to the grill, he thinks that he can't get out. But actually, if he just turned around, he's free to jump over.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Yeah. What focus, and go back to conflict, when we have a conflict, we focus on that. We don't focus on the rest to the point where we forget the rest.
Yeah. And I think people would be surprised the number of situations that I come into. And I know, my colleagues, my other mediators that I'm aware of, that they have come into and seen massive transformation. And the parties going into it really cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel. They really cannot see how this can be resolved. And yet somehow the process of asking questions, of reflecting, of really being quite honest with, your contribution to what, the situation you're in.
Honest with yourself, yeah.
Being completely honest with yourself and being honest with the other person, and kind of allowing a little bit of vulnerability to creep back into that relationship. It is amazing what the process can do.
Well, Emma, we're getting towards the end of our time together, but one final question.
Yes.
At what point do you think that, people need to wake up and think, no, I need to sort this?
I think I kind of referred a little bit to it earlier, that if you're thinking about it regularly, if it comes to mind when you're having an argument, if that's the thing that always gets brought up, then you either need to do a little bit more internal work to process it, if that's the correct thing to do in that situation, or both, I would say. Then that needs to be addressed, because if it's getting brought up, then that means the issue is not resolved. If you're thinking about it regularly, and normally it happens at moments of a clash. So they do something that annoys you, normally you'll go, oh, and they did this in the past. If that happens a lot, it's an issue, it needs to be resolved.
Right, Emma, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
And for everybody else, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, then please subscribe, leave us a review, but more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.